welcome everybody to another episode of Crowd Content Labs. We're going to change the format a little bit today. So we're going to focus less on news because you're probably getting your news from everywhere and all the million newsletters that are out there. So you don't need another one talking about the same. So we're going to focus on what we're experts on, which is content production. So today is going to be the first segment of just fully dedicated episodes to content production. And today we're going to talk about how to onboard clients successfully for content production. So it's very useful for if you're an agency, if you're an SEO agency, if you're a content marketing agency, even if you're a freelance writer that wants to onboard a client. Doesn't mean that if you are not an agency or a freelance writer, it doesn't work. This segment today would be useful to onboard your own team internally to produce content and get your content production process going. Okay, so let's get with onboarding. Rick, you are the expert at onboarding clients for content. So working session is a big part of it. So you're going to walk us today through, how to conduct a working session properly. You're going to share your screen, and I'm very excited about this new format. So back to you, Rick.
Well, thanks, Carlos. Yeah, so last week, if you were with us, I talked about onboarding a client in the 4 phases of onboarding. One of those phases being the working session. Some of you may call it a kickoff call or just onboarding. We call it a working session. So a working session is a face-to-face meeting between the production people and the client. And the whole purpose of a working session is to get alignment. So today I'd like to walk you through, to really draw back the curtain and show you how we onboard clients. This is how
I think it's called a working session because you're working with the client at the same time on this process, right? Would that be fair?
That would be fair. It is. It's not a presentation. It's a back and forth. A lot of decisions are made. A lot of questions are asked. So it is working, which is, I guess, where the term working session, maybe we should brand this. I don't know, Carlos, but I'll tell
working
you.
Session trademarked.
Right? When it comes to onboarding a client, there is almost nothing more important than a strong, well-run working session. And today I'm going to show you how to do just that. Good news is I'm going to show you some of the resources we use and then tell you how you can get them and customize them to your purpose. This can be done whether you're an agency onboarding clients who will be producing content, but even if you're just a writer, you can use this method to onboard your clients to make sure that you get that alignment. So alignment's key word. I'll probably say it like 6 times. It's all about alignment. Go ahead, buddy.
No, this is like, who is this great for? So this is great if you're an agency, more specifically, if you're an agency that offers content services. How to onboard a client is key. If you're a freelance writer that works for brands or even for other agencies, it's also you can use it to onboard these clients. If you're a brand, if you have your internal content production, is probably something that you can borrow to onboard the team that is going to produce the content, right, Rick?
You can kind of use it in reverse and turn it into more of a presentation to onboard a writer or writing teams rather than a discovery. Because even done in reverse like that, it's still about alignment between you and the people who will be writing your content. So done well, a working session will result in shorter ramp-up time from getting your client onboarding and to getting into that full throughput production. Fewer revisions. You'll be closer to target right from the get-go. Better content because some decisions are made and advising is done, consulting is done during this working session where you can come to agreements with your client on what is truly best to help them reach their goals. Fewer misunderstandings with your client because onboardings can be really bumpy. That first month or 2 when you're trying to produce content and get that alignment can be very bumpy, and that leads to client frustration. So happy clients can result from running a good, strong working session. Obviously, things that are at risk if you either skip or take shortcuts during this process, pretty much the opposite of what I just said, right? You're going to have broken workflows. You'll likely be doing numerous revisions. You're going to have angry clients. It's going to be a lot of uncertainty on both sides of the table. You'll be delivering content to your client that you don't feel 100% certain meets their or will meet their expectations. And I got to tell you, it's a really good feeling, Carlos, when you're sending off a delivery to a client, you feel good that you're on target here. So let's take a quick look. I'm going to take you through our deck. This one is customized to crowd content. This is what our clients see when we onboard them. But you'll be able to go on our site and get a template that is almost exactly like this, but it gives you a spot to put your logo, and it removes some of the things that are just specific to us. So I'm going to give you a quick
we'll make sure that we'll make sure that we link to the episode as well, so people can go and download the template, right?
Yes. So there's 3 phases to a working session, and I'm going to show you each of the slides for each phase. Those phases are agreement alignment, content alignment, and logistical alignment. All of these things need to be discussed. Decisions need to be made for each one. The first one, agreement alignment, that's kind of where you go through the contract, the SOW, the verbal agreement, whatever you may have, to make sure that both sides are understanding this thing in the same way. And the following slides help with that. It starts with just meeting your team, obviously, going through intros. Here's, our team for our clients to see. But then you go through, I'm sorry, I should have skipped. There are actually 4 parts of the deck. There's the introduction and a quick look at the agenda before you get into the agreement alignment. So you're going to look at, the length of the agreement, the project scope, the volume and timeline, the rates of the agreement. You know why it's important to go through this, Carlos, is we have found that the agreement is often reached with somebody who isn't on the working session, right? Maybe it's an executive, a department head who came to the agreement, who signed off on the SOW contract, but the working session's really with the content people. And they may not be fully versed in what agreements were reached. So it's a good idea to go through this stuff with them so that they're aware. Here's how long we're supposed to be working together. Here's our understanding of what we're going to be producing for you. Here's how much of it we're going to produce over what period. These are the rates that were agreed upon.
Yeah, and it's very common in many organizations that the salespeople don't talk to the people doing the delivery of the service or the product. So when they get to see the contract, like, what is this? What did you agree to? And then what the people
always
the
better
conversation
to get
that was
aligned before you're doing it as a way to resolve a dispute. Mm-hmm. So if we're going through these points now, when there isn't a dispute, there isn't a problem we're trying to resolve, then it's a much better position to come at it from than, hey, this is what the contract says. So yeah, definitely recommend building it into your working session. This is the part where you also find out who to communicate with, depending on, is it a day-to-day thing? Is it about the relationship or the account? Is it an editorial question? And communication preferences. This phase, this is a custom slide for us. It wouldn't be in the template. Our account manager is always after the content managers to make sure she's CC'd. So we put a slide in just for her. Then we talk about who's filling roles on the other side of the table. And that's what's talked about on this slide. Who's doing the SEO and strategy? Who's doing the content briefs? Who's doing submissions? Who's doing content evaluation? If your business is providing these services, you would pull them out of here, replace it with something else. But you always want to know who is doing each of the steps that lead up to your part or your team's part. And that's what this slide is about. And then we have a couple of kind of policy slides. Again, this is agreement alignment. So we have a standard turnaround time. And here are some tips on that. So this is just to reinforce this is what turnaround we've agreed to. how we can handle rush orders, how we can potentially shorten that turnaround time through a regular, predictable cadence, things of that nature. But again, just to make sure that everybody at the table is aware of the policies or the agreement that was reached and how revisions and rewrites will be handled. Now, we enter into phase 2 of the working session. So we've got an alignment on the agreement. Everybody should now understand how we're all going to work together. Now's the part where we do discovery on the content itself. This is really the nitty gritty, the meat of the working session. It's getting that transfer of knowledge from the person who has a vision of what the content's going to be to the person who's actually going to oversee the creation of that content. And it starts at a very high level, this overview of you slide, where we talk about, tell me what your business is, not just what you do. I mean, I've already, done my homework. I've looked at your website. I've reviewed the agreement. I have an idea of what your business does and what we're going to be doing for you, but it's always good to hear it directly from the client, not just what they do, but how they view themselves in their market. Are they niche or boutique, or are they a major player? Do they consider themselves the premium product, or are they the more budget friendly option? It's good to get that opinion or that viewpoint from someone at the business so that you understand the brand's positioning in its market, because that will help inform how you craft their content. You also want to find out what types of content will they be creating. Because if you're doing multiple content types, you've got to do this segment, the granular content alignment discovery segment, each time for each content type. If you're going to be doing local pages and blog posts, don't lump them together when you're discussing all the specifics of the content. Handle each one separately. The second one may be shorter because maybe a lot of the stylistic choices apply, and they can simply say all of this is the same and you can move on. But you do need to handle them separately. So find out here exactly which content types you'll be creating, and then find out what the goals for that content are. And this should always lead into a very important follow-up question, and that is, how are you measuring that goal? So why are we creating this content? What goals are we trying to reach? Is it, are you trying to increase traffic, brand awareness? Is it conversions? And once you have the answer to that question, find out how they'll be measuring it. So you're going to want to check in throughout the life of this project to see how that content is performing against that goal. And it's also on this slide, we get
and I think it's important. It is important to make sure that, the goals are realistic. Yeah, one of the things that we see with people that want to create content but probably don't have an expertise in content or SEO for that matter, or content marketing in general, is that many times they have unrealistic goals. Say, I want to 10x my traffic in the next 3 months. Well, that ain't going to happen. Well, it might, but you're going to have to put a lot of resources into it, right? Or, I want to 100x my lead generation. You have zero content.
So we could raise our rates for that one, right?
Right. But one of the things that we see very often is not a good understanding of the metrics and what it takes to create content and get results from content. So it takes time. Content is a long game, but is it really good ROI? But explaining those to the clients is very important. This is one of the places where you could do that as an agency, or we try to do this with our clients. Just make sure that we have realistic expectations.
Excellent point. And then last thing on this slide is to learn about the audience. Who are we going to be speaking to? Why are they your audience? What is it about your brand, your company that draws them? So not just their demographics, their psychographics, but what are their pain points? What do they find useful? Or aspirationally speaking, how do you want to be when it comes to your content to your audience? Because a lot of times companies aren't where they want to be with their content. So we talk about that here. In the next handful of slides, we get into the nitty gritty. I won't bore you with some of this stuff. It's time consuming, but we're going to talk about the content briefs for the project, whether we're creating them or our client is creating them. So for you, if you're going to be creating a content brief, this is the top part where you walk your client through that brief and the components they can expect. If they're creating the content briefs, this is where you can ask them clarifying questions or let them know, if there are brief components that are missing that would be really useful. Here's where you go through all of that. Then we cover brand voice, which is really critical. So it's one of the very first things in here, and what's key is it documented? Do you have it? Do you have a resource that we can give to the writers that explains your voice in a way that's more than we're authoritative and trustworthy? Because I can give you 20 different pieces of content that are authoritative and trustworthy that sound nothing alike. So at this point, you're really doing that deep dive into voice and how we can give actionable direction to writers to help them achieve that voice consistently every time. Did you have something there, Carlos?
Yeah. So how often do our clients show up with a very well detailed, ready to go brand voice guide? Tell me the truth, Rick.
It's funny. Sometimes they'll send over these massive documents. That's like a combination of a style guide and brand guide, and it'll include voice. And I've seen them upwards of 90 pages or more. And then there's like 2 pages on voice, and it's a list of 7 adjectives. Really, really vague. You don't really see how they work together. No examples whatsoever. Maybe a list of their values, which I guess helps with voice, but it's I almost never see something from a client that I can say I can give this to the writers and they will know how to hit the voice. So you can't spend too much time on this slide. Getting that alignment on brand voice, and in fact, we should probably do a segment soon, Carlos, that's just on this slide, and
We'll do
ways
one.
to get
We'll
that
have to help people to
information.
create. Yeah, we need to help people how to create a brand, the right brand voice guide, and I think it would be a great resource because we see this is one of the things where we see a lot of gaps, right? And I get it. For agencies, they do more than content, right? So sometimes this is one of the things where they might not get too deep into it. So if you're an agency owner, if you have your or you work in an agency, this is one of the things where we see the most gaps and where it's easier to make the most mistakes and spend the most resources because if you don't get the voice right and you don't have the right guide, then you send the content back to a client. It's just doesn't sound like I want it to sound. Yeah, well, you need to tell me how you want it to sound, and not just tell me, but also show me, because sometimes articulating your vision is very hard. You just need to probably put an example together to be able to do so. So anyway, we'll do a segment, a future episode about this, hopefully in the next few weeks, to help people with that. But carry on.
Awesome. So after you get through voice, then you'd go into style. This is your really granular serial commas and title case versus sentence case. And are we CMOS? Are we AP style? The restricted words, what perspective? So you're really, really getting into the words themselves here and learning what the preferences of the client are. Why this is important to cover and make decisions on is if you're using a writing team rather than a single writer, you will have inconsistencies in all of these things in the end product if you don't define them at this granular a level. It can be very easy, just go with AP style, but that still often brings up question marks. So there are certain things that you want to absolutely call out. This is how we do it, and we do it this way in every piece, so that a larger writing team, 5, 10, 20 different writers, are producing things exactly the same way. This next slide, content structure, same kind of story here, but more, we're leaving just the individual words now and looking at the entire piece of the content and its structure. How are we handling bullets and numbered lists? Are H2s and H3s okay? What about H4s? Should we go with H4s or bolded body text? Are quotes okay? Are we allowed to make grammatic changes to quotes or punctuation changes in quotes? How do you want conclusions and intros handled? So same, just like the style slide, but just kind of zooming out a little bit, looking at the larger scope of the content itself on here. Again, all for consistency. Then we kind of get into optimization. How are we handling keywords? What other SERP features are we targeting, and how should we target those? How are we optimizing for the reader? How are we getting that differentiation or information gain to the writer rather than just hoping that they're going to go and develop it on their own? How are we getting that done? How are we providing them value? How are we being unique in our ranking competitors? And then, the metas, some just checking the boxes here. Who's doing the meta titles? Who's doing the meta descriptions? And how should they be optimized? And we get into things like linking. And again, for consistency, how is this stuff being handled? On internal linking, who's going to be providing the recommendations, or are we leaving that up to the writer? Is it even encouraged? Some companies do the internal linking on the back end after the content is produced, so we figure those things out here. Are there restrictions with internal linking, like stay away from the service pages, just focus on blogs? How should anchor text be handled? Any preferences there? And then when it comes to external linking, it's less of a question most of the time and more, this is best practices. We're going to link to claims and statistics, back it up with credible sources that are no more than 2 or 3 years old. We're not going to link to competitors. We're going to avoid linking to similar content, other blog posts that are basically covering the same thing. And we'll address whether or not other preferences are there for the external linking. We do the same thing for calls to action. This is often glossed over, Carlos, in projects. It's put a CTA in. Make sure you put a CTA. Well, what's the CTA? What are we pitching? Are we doing it in a salesy way? Is it soft? Are we doing it more than once? Are we peppering it throughout the piece? Are we just saving it for the end? Do you want a vague, just contact us for more information? Like, what are we doing? How are we enticing these people? And oftentimes not enough thought is put into this, or at least not expressed to the writer who's writing inline CTAs. And you end up with those vague CTAs that really aren't going to convert much. So we cover that here. And then finally, there's a catch-all slide to conclude the phase 2, the second element of the working session, that content discovery. Just a catch-all for anything specific to their content, because different content types come with different questions, not all of which are captured on the preceding slides. So this just gives that area to talk about the odds and ends before we move into project logistics, the third phase of the working session. This is where we get alignment on expectations and how we're going to do things. How many items are we going to be producing? Is it per week? Is it per month? When will submissions be made? How will submissions be made? When will deliveries be made? And how would you like them formatted? All of that is discussed and decided upon on this call. And that's key here, is decision making. You should never leave a working session by kicking things down the road. We'll punt that to later. Always try to make decisions on these calls. Another thing to determine is workflow centralization. Is there a content calendar? If there isn't, there should be one. We use a thing called an event calendar. It's not typical in the industry, so it probably doesn't have much meaning to our audience, but it's like a content calendar, but at the batch level, and different requirements from both us and from our clients. This needs to be done by when type of thing. We also have a tool called Client Hub that helps to centralize the workflow, and we invite them onto a team Slack for faster communication here. But you can replace these things with your method of centralizing your workflows with your clients. And then that goes into calibration. For anybody who's not aware, calibration is where you test out everything you've learned on this working session. It's about testing the workflow. It's about testing the project brief that you create from this. It's all about testing. You build out a project brief, you build out a workflow, you put a team together, and you hand them your resources and see if your system works. So this is the part where we explain that to the client. Here's what we're going to do, and here's why we're going to do it. It's not just testing the writing quality; it's testing my instructions to the writers. Because I should be able to give these instructions to 20 writers and get the same thing from each of them without having to coach them on it. The workflow should work efficiently and get me to my deadline and a deliverable in the right format out to the client. So calibration is a testing for the client to see that they're getting what they asked for, and it's a test for me to see that my project is running, or my CM's project is running the way it's supposed to be running. And it's just a critical part. So this is where we explain that to the client. We set up a face-to-face feedback call afterwards. So we're really testing out alignment here. Did I actually get your vision? Go ahead, Carlos.
Yeah, so very few people do this, calibrating their
Really?
projects. Yeah, I don't think this is very common as we think it is, but it's probably one of the things that we have realized that makes a difference. Just testing the process on a small scale. I think more often than not, people go straight into producing the content, which creates a lot of friction and a lot of unhappy clients, a lot of unhappy people. Because it's very hard to nail it. If you've been working on content for a while, you'd realize that it's hard to nail it at the first go, right? So you need to iterate until you get it right. So if you take one thing from this video, is make sure that you test your content creation process so you can hit the quality that you're looking for, and also the process works, right? Because you're testing the whole engine.
If you can't get rid of right with one or two pieces, how are you supposed to get it right with 25 or more at the same time, spread across an even larger group of writers? You're testing your resources here. You're looking for gaps in that information that you're giving to your writers and your editors to help them execute. You're also testing your understanding of what your client is telling you they want, because they're not always great at expressing that. So your writers may follow your direction to the T, and then you find you still missed the mark because it was your understanding, your vision that was not truly aligned with the client. So you've got to do this. Otherwise, you find yourself with 50 articles that need revisions. Nobody wants that. Do it with one or two and keep doing it until your client says, this is exactly what I'm looking for. Then scale it up. And that can be frustrating. You want to get out and start cranking out this content, get that revenue pouring in, but trust me, it's not worth it. When things go wrong, and next thing you know, you've either got an unhappy client who's ready to fire you, or 100 articles that all need significant revisions. Calibrate, please. After that, we go through feedback and touch bases. These things are very important. How are we getting feedback both initially and ongoing? How often are we meeting face-to-face to talk about how the project is going? For us, it's through delivery confirmations, NPSs, weekly touch bases, QBRs. So we have both written forms and face-to-face conversations to get the feedback that's critical for writers. I like to put these little quotes in here. And then it ends with just, here's a look at what's going to come next. You're going to receive a working session summary. We're going to create a project brief. We're going to put the workflow together, build the team, assign the calibration, deliver the calibration, then talk about the calibration. So whether you're us or you're an agency or you're a writer, I recommend following that same exact process right there. And then we wrap it up with questions. And that's the whole deck. A couple quick resources that you can use with this deck, Carlos. Really critical here. When you're done with the call that you take, you can borrow ours. We have a generic one up on the site called a working session summary. This is where you don't rely on a transcript from a call. Get the transcript, that's great, but don't rely on that. What you want to type in here is your understanding of everything you just learned. Put it into your own words. Here's how I understand everything you just told me. And you send it off to the client and have them respond approving it. This is just an extra step to ensure that what you heard is the same as what they said, because oftentimes it isn't, right? There's lots of misunderstandings. You can also outline next steps. Last thing, and this is a little bit backwards, but you can use this working session agenda to send to your client prior to the call. This helps explain what the working session is and why you do it, along with assigning them some homework to do to prepare for the call and to give them a quick look at the topics you're going to discuss on that call to help them just start thinking about those things so that hopefully they come to the call prepared. That's it. That's so yeah, go to our site. If you like that deck, if you like the agenda, the working session template, all of it is available on crowdcontent.com. You can go there, go up to resources. I think it's the very top one, says free tools. You'll see all sorts of templates and resources in there. These three with that, along with some other things that might also help you with onboarding. Any questions, Carlos?
Yeah. So what are the most common mistakes that you see people making in these working sessions?
Not including your content people. I mean it. Like sometimes it'll be like the logistical leader, the content manager on the call, who may not be the person who's going to be reviewing the content for voice, for quality. We need that person on the call. We need the person who can speak to the words themselves. That's one. Just kind of blowing it off, not sending resources out ahead of time. Like you should be, if you're running the working session, you've got to put time in ahead of this, reviewing that brand style guide if they have one, reviewing the content briefs that they send you to determine if everything that you need is there in a content brief. If we're addressing intent, some people come with such a mess that if you don't get eyes on those resources prior to the working session, you're going to be in for trouble afterwards. So allowing the working session to happen without getting those things up front is a big mistake. Not following a structure, a format, because clients will sidetrack you every chance they get. They're not doing it on purpose, just you're asking questions, and that's leading them to think of other things, and you'll follow that rabbit hole. And then you completely lose your train of thought. You won't remember where you were before, what's been discussed. There have been some working sessions I've gotten off of Carlos where I swear we made 148 decisions, and then ultimately we missed so much, which led to, we need this deck to help keep it on track. So use a deck, use a structure, use an agenda. This will help address those issues, those questions that come up that sidetrack you, and then help get you right back to where you were to ensure that you're covering all of the important things that need to be talked about during this session.
Okay. Well, very useful. And again, a good reminder to agency owners or agency people to get alignment. That's really the word of the day, alignment. Get aligned and also kind of confirm expectations and set the expectations properly. Sending that summary, right? So everybody kind of knows what was agreed upon, because there's so much confusion sometimes, so much back and forth that, I thought I said this, I thought you said that, and then is everything hearsay, right? If you have this summary and you get the client to approve it and kind of bless it, say, okay, we're all in agreement, we're all aligned. Again, we see a lot of problems with the quality of content is because there was not enough planning, alignment, or calibration, right? People didn't test. So remember, aligning expectations and calibrating the process and getting as much information out of the client's brain as possible. Those are the things that are going to make content production successful. So this is a great guide, Rick. Thank you very much for sharing with us and sharing with the audience. We're going to put the links to these resources, which are very valuable. We're producing more of these, so stay tuned, because we're going to come out with some others. Future episodes about, we're going to do Brand Voice Guide, future episode about AI content detection tools, and we're going to keep talking about production. We want to change the format to give you something that is more usable, that you can go and apply. Watch the video and go and apply it right away. So we're going to focus on that. Give us feedback as well. Just feel free to reply to the newsletter straight, or there is a link for a survey there. But thank you, everybody, for yet another episode, and stay tuned until the next one.